Hey guys, welcome back. It's Cult of Film. Wanted to review, discuss, I guess, a classic cult film that I've known about for a few years, but only recently just watched. It's called Martin by George A. Romero. This is Romero's first and I think only vampire film. And we all know him for his, dead films. Night of the Living Dead, Dawn of the Dead, Day of the Dead. But he was doing a lot of really interesting creative stuff throughout the 70s. And one of the films that he did is Martin. Martin is, I guess you could describe it as a deconstruction or reconstruction, sort of revisionist approach to the vampire myth. And it's basically set in late 70s. It was made in 77. A city outside of Pittsburgh. I don't know if it's called Braddock or Brannock. Can't remember specifically the name of the town, but it is a almost hyper realistic sort of vampire film. And this, to my knowledge, might be one of the first real stabs at hyper realistic vampire films. One of the things that I really like about Romero's work, at least his early work, is it is incredibly creative. It is incredibly original. He did it with super small cast and crews for very little money, for very little money. And I feel like those are the works that really stick out for me. And Martin is definitely one of those films. It like I said, it opens in sort of economically depressed and crumbling city in Pennsylvania, just outside of Pittsburgh, and you have this young man named Martin who is he's on a train to the city or to Pennsylvania, can't remember exactly which, and while he's on the train, he again, there are spoilers here. I'm going to try not to spoil too much. He essentially attacks a woman, but seems to be doing so in a quasi-humane way, to basically to drug her, and to drug her specifically to steal her blood. And we kind of put together, as we're shown, that he drinks human blood. So again, we're off to the races. We know, okay, this is an interesting original take on the vampire myth, the vampire concept. His train arrives in town, where he's picked up by his uncle, who I believe is Romanian, certainly Eastern European, and is sort of this Van Helsing-like character who was, I guess, taking him in. They kind of strike up a deal that Martin is not allowed to take anyone from the town while he's there, that he's basically a good Catholic and going to try to save Martin's soul, and that if Martin doesn't comply, well, Uncle Kuda will destroy him. And so you have this tension right away. What's so interesting about it is Martin isn't a typical vampire. He does kind of look like one. The actor John Amplas, was a young kid in this movie, though he's much older than that within the story. Really has a very unique look, and I feel the casting is absolutely spot on. Romero really, really nailed it. This kid looks kind of like a younger, spooky, oh God, what was the Charles Manson in a way. He's got kind of like those eyes. At the same time, John Amplas really plays this character of Martin as incredibly sympathetic. You realize that he doesn't want to do this. He's kind of compelled to do this if he wants to survive. And we see him sort of making his way through the town. He's working for his Uncle Kuda. Uncle Kuda has a grocery store. He was making deliveries, just trying to stay on the straight and narrow as much as he can. But again, as a vampire, he at some point has to get human blood. And so we see him doing this, and he eventually strikes up a connection with one of the customers of Uncle Kuda's grocery, and he kind of allows himself to feel. Within the film, Martin is, I think, he's talking with his cousin, who, again, his cousin, who is Uncle Kuda's daughter, doesn't believe in any of this, doesn't believe in Uncle Kuda's myths about vampires and exorcism and saving souls. She doesn't believe in any of it. And so there's a real tension between her and her uncle. And while Martin does tell her, no, I'm 85, this is what I have to do, and so forth, she's kind of like, maybe we could take you to a doctor. Maybe we could help you. And Martin explains that really wouldn't be good for me and it wouldn't change anything. So there's this interesting sort of interesting dynamic between the daughter, who's completely secular, completely science and evidence based, her uncle, who is very much in the old ways, the old rites, the old mysticism, and then you have Martin, who says over and over that there is no such thing as magic, that the things that Uncle Kuda is insisting on aren't real, that he can't, and Martin sort of illustrates that you can't be repelled by garlic, you can't be repelled by crucifixes, you can't be repelled by holy water. And so, again, this groundedness that Romero creates for Martin's sort of condition, it seems to be, if not biological, physiological, perhaps a spiritual, maybe in the mind. But in any case, Martin definitely has some type of a condition, and it doesn't seem to be anything connected to magic or the supernatural, despite Uncle Kuda's insistence that it is. And so you have Christine, who is his cousin, who wants the best for him. You have Uncle Kuda, who is absolutely convinced that Martin is either going to pass this test or will be destroyed. A very hellfire and brimstone sort of old school Catholic approach. And then you have Martin, who is, again, despite the fact that he does force himself on people, doesn't seem to want to do it, seems to do it because he has to. He does sort of evolve, and again strikes up this relationship with friendship, I should say, with this woman who gets her deliveries from Uncle Kuda. And there's a real sort of tenderness and a softness, a real vulnerability to Martin, brought to the character by, again, actor John Amplas. And it's really, really fun to watch. It's so interesting. Another major character within the film is this sort of very economically dilapidated and crumbling town there in Pennsylvania. This movie would not have been what it is if they had shot it in New York, if they had shot it, someplace prettier, what we kind of do with almost everything nowadays. So it gives it a real grit, a real groundedness, a sense of almost hyper-realism. Also, the entire film was shot on 16 millimeter, which also adds to the graininess, the grittiness, the sort of exhaustedness of the setting, of the town, of the characters that we don't get much of today. I'm so drawn to these more textured, gritty films than the bombardment and almost total proliferation of video game movies, two of which I watched yesterday, that you can't even get you can't get a sense of place with a lot of these things. They'll shoot a few things outside during the day and whatnot, maybe at night. The rest, I can tell they're in a vehicle on a soundstage in front of a green screen. And again, I'm not against any of these tools. We use one here now, but it does disconnect me as a viewer from, I don't know, being fully immersed in some of the experiences. Not all films that use, such techniques in effect take me out, but a fair share do. You don't have any of that with Martin. Martin, it is literally somebody picked up a camera and started shooting around, their town, their dilapidated, crumbling town, using real people and real locations because they didn't have massive budgets. And that's really what makes Martin just so fun. I was watching some interviews about the film. Romero regards it as his favorite film, which I thought was really interesting. Out of all of the things he has done, he gradually, and it took him maybe 20 years to finally get the acknowledgement from Hollywood that he could really flex his muscles with bigger budgets and so on. And he went on to do that. He adapted a few Stephen King stories to film, and did get bigger and bigger budgets. I do find it interesting how many of these folks, like Romero, certainly like John Carpenter, who finally get the acknowledgement from Hollywood and from studios after they masterfully create incredible films on low to no budgets with just a dedicated team of people. And yeah, it becomes a different game. There's several films in with some of the studios, and the magic kind of goes away for these guys. And not for everyone. We have the Christopher Nolans, we have the Jordan Peele's, we have the Quentin Tarantino's, obviously, that it really works for them within the studio system. I think that if people like Romero and John Carpenter were somehow able to raise the money they needed outside of a studio system and continue to produce the films that they wanted to with less studio oversight, they might have stuck it out longer. Their work may have kept that originality, but that original sort of shine, that original, oh God, I'm not sure even how to say it. That real pure sense of vision. You look at Night of the Living Dead, you look at Martin, you look at Romero's witch movie called Season of the Witch. I saw about 4 or 5 years ago. Really good. The Crazies, really original, fun movies, gritty, homegrown. They feel real. And then you compare it to some of his later work, and it kind of rings hollow. I would say some of that rings true. Not so much of John Carpenter. John Carpenter, even when you could tell that he was maybe kind of losing a bit of interest in the magic, it's still sort of there. But I do wonder if these guys had been allowed to have as much creative say-so at the studio level as they did when they were just bootstrapping it, if those later works might have been a bit more what they had wanted, or what maybe we come to expect, from these guys. Again, this is not a criticism of these directors. These guys have done way more than I have. I absolutely love, respect, and revere them and their work. But I do find it interesting that Romero regards Martin, a 16 millimeter, $75,000 film, as his favorite when he got a chance to adapt Stephen King novels. So if that isn't enough to get you to check out Martin, I don't know what is. Because again, the gritty sort of 16 millimeter feel, it has, as I was watching it, it felt like I was a kid again, sort of watching creature features on the weekend, watching WFLD Channel 32 in Chicago. They would play so many of these old movies that clearly had negative scratches, and the coloring was off, and so on and so forth. But it was so fun. And that's, Martin really has that feel. And so it takes me back to maybe a lot of this is colored by nostalgia, but I do think it's a real classic. There does seem to be quite a following for it. Romero regards it as his favorite film. He even appears in it as a priest, and it's pretty fun seeing him do that. But check out Martin. It's a fun, original take on the vampire myth. He doesn't get stuck in any of the tropes of the vampire genre at all. You can really see he's exploring themes of loneliness, of sexual repression, of what it is like to wonder how things are going to turn out. Again, he's filming it in the late 70s in this economically dilapidating town. And so, we obviously we have that, in parts of the country, many parts of the world today. So the movie is a lot of fun, and you can just lay back and sort of enjoy it. It's original, it's interesting, it's layered, it's textured, because it's the 70s. So much of the decor and the look of it is really cool. But there's also just, you can feel the loneliness in the characters. You can feel their hopes. You can feel all of those things. it might be. I would say it's a close second to Romero's best film, which I can, Night of the Living Dead, which we also reviewed for the channel a few months ago with Monica of Spooky Tuesday. Check her out. But right now, you can see Martin, George A. Romero's Martin, 1977, on YouTube. There's a channel called Filmix here on YouTube. Filmix. You can see Martin and a whole bunch of other sort of lesser known movies from the 70s there. And of course, you can find it at our favorite, tubitv.com, tubitv.com. We love Tubi. I have found so much great stuff there. All you do have to is to sign up with your email. They don't spam you at all, and you basically have access to their entire library. So you can watch things like Martin. You can watch things like the original Fast and Furious. You can watch documentaries. Lots of great stuff there on Tubi. But do yourself a favor, check out Martin. And yeah, if there's anything else along the lines of maybe other Romero works or movies like Martin or sort of in that universe, please comment below. If you've enjoyed the video, if you end up checking it out and get something out of it, please like, subscribe, and we'll see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.